You made some bad calls this fantasy season. I made some bad calls this fantasy season. Every fantasy manager is going to make some bad calls during each and every year of football. I mean, goodness, the ball isn't even round after all. That said, guys, as much as we maybe made some player-by-player bad draft picks, there are also some calls that the industry as a whole got wrong, and that's what we are here to break down. I have 3 different things that have happened throughout the 2023 season that I think you, me, and the rest of our league mates should have done a much better job of getting right in hindsight. As always, it's a great day to be great. First up, we have Jerry Jeudy not being the #1 wide receiver for the Denver Broncos. Hand up, guys, I've drafted a lot of Jeudy this past summer, and the reasoning at the time seemed sound enough. He finished as the wide receiver 6 overall during the final 6 weeks of last season after coming back from injury, and looked like he was in an ascending Broncos passing attack now led by Sean Payton. Hasn't quite gone that way, guys. As much as I would like to blame that preseason hamstring injury, he actually only missed 1 game out there. And now when we do look at the cumulative season statistics, just 1 trip to the end zone and a career low 44 receiving yards. Not exactly what fantasy managers were looking for out of their 4th round pick. I mean, seriously, at this point, the 2 biggest things that Jeudy's 2023 season will be remembered by is Steve Smith calling him just a guy and an average receiver on national television.
I'll say it again. I'm sorry that I said you were a jag, just a guy who's an average wide receiver they use a 1st round pick on that isn't doing anything. I hope today that you actually show up in a way that you haven't showed up in the last couple years since they drafted you.
And also Jeudy, admittedly, doing a pretty cool move where he actually did the QB pump fake thing past the line of scrimmage. Sadly, didn't get extra fantasy points for that stunt. Now, there still is a chance for Jeudy to go nuclear down the stretch, kind of like he did last year. The schedule is setting up nicely with the Texans, the Lions, the Patriots, and 2 dates against the Chargers still on the docket down the stretch. But guys, even if that goes well, I think we have learned a very good lesson here with Jeudy and even Cam Akers. When we do get these major end of season booms in really bad offenses, maybe we should take a bit longer look at that production, because it's going to be a bit harder for those players in new offenses in a new season to just pick up where things left off the following year. All right, guys, second thing fantasy managers got wrong in 2023 was trusting pretty much anybody involved in this Arthur Smith-led Falcons offense. And this honestly applies to just about everyone other than Jonnu Smith, because, of course, Desmond Ridder, though, guys, yes, he will make an occasionally cool throw, and he's even flashed some rushing upside this season, but man, when you are tied for dead last with Mac Jones for turnover-worthy play rate this season, you know things haven't been going great. There's also Bijan Robinson, who, yes, has had some great games recently, and my God, I would watch an entire game of him with that Falcons overhead camera. That said, guys, 20th in expected PPR points per game. He has not been given anything close to the workload that we would expect for a legit top 10 pick. There's also Tyler Algier, 3rd worst running back among 40 qualified players at the position in yards per touch. But yeah, let's keep splitting touches with him and Bijan Robinson. Why not? Oh, lest we forget, Drake London, 40th in expected PPR points per game, despite continuing to look like one of the next big things at the position pretty much every time the Falcons throw the ball in his direction. And finally, how could we forget Mr. Kyle Pitts himself, just 2 games north of 50 receiving yards all season. And the saddest part is we have to watch his #2 running mate, Jonnu Smith, go off each and every week. Guys, if we just pretended like every single team's tight end room was the same person, the best group would be the Vikings. No buys yet. TJ Hawkinson making plays. The second best group is the Chiefs. Travis Kelce makes sense. The third is the Falcons. Man, that sucks. In terms of Ridder, there were some signs of this. Small sample sizes be damned. He was arguably more inaccurate than Marcus Mariota even was last year, and when you couldn't beat out Marcus Mariota for the first 3 months of a season anyway, maybe we all should have collectively taken a bit more notice. But man, at the end of the day, this whole situation has been made that much more frustrating by the reality that Arthur Smith won't stop being so smug about it all, blaming fantasy football for not getting his top 10 real-life draft picks the ball more, and insinuating that because the Falcons are on top of by far the worst division in football, that all of his game planning and meticulous depth chart juggling is actually going right. Guys, hate to break this to you, but the Falcons, 22nd in scoring this year and one of just 6 teams to still not even crack 30 points in a single game. I don't know, guys. I'm not a doctor. I'm definitely not an NFL head coach. Doesn't seem like that's a great offense to me. So one could say that the biggest lesson to be learned here is simply to never ever trust Arthur Smith again. And while I'm not necessarily opposed to that, I do believe the biggest lesson here, and also in Pittsburgh over the past few years for that matter, is not always assuming the grass is going to be greener on the other side with a new quarterback just because your old quarterback was bad, whether it was washed up Big Ben going to a rookie Kenny Pickett or a Marcus Mariota going to a second year and still very much unproven Desmond Ridder. Fantasy managers of all shapes and sizes should have been a bit more worried about how Ridder was going to impact all of these skill position players involved, and accordingly, we are all stuck sheeshing. And the third thing that fantasy managers of most shapes and sizes got wrong entering the 2023 season was the belief that the CJ Stroud-led Texans offense wouldn't be incredible. Now, I get it. I don't think even the most optimistic Texans fans or CJ Stroud truthers were expecting exactly what we've gotten, which is Stroud well on pace to break the NFL rookie record for most passing yards in a season. Hell, that man is leading all NFL quarterbacks this year, regardless of experience, in passing yards per game. Pretty good, and accordingly, this really has been the tide lifting all bodies involved inside this Texans offense, except one. And sadly, the one that is not balling out this year is probably the one, if any, that you drafted pretty high in your drafts back in August. Again, Stroud deserves the heavy bulk of the credit here, but also shout out to first-year offensive coordinator Bobby Slowick for putting everyone in a position to succeed, the banged-up offensive line for keeping on despite dealing with a whirlwind of injuries, particularly in the first 4 to 6 weeks of the year. But also, guys, turns out some of these pass catchers are pretty freaking good at football. Specifically, both Nico Collins and Tank Dell have earned top 10 receiving grades from ESPN's new receiving rating metric. That's not too shabby, guys. And again, even if you're a bit cautious of some of these end-all, be-all, one-size-fits-all metrics out there, we'd much rather have guys in the top 10 as opposed to the bottom 10. I mean, seriously, back in the preseason, when we looked at the fantasy playoffs, it was all about Derrick Henry getting 2 cracks against this Texans run defense. But now the entire story is about CJ Stroud and this lethal passing attack getting to face this ever-pass funnel Titans secondary in week 15 and week 17. Wouldn't be surprised, guys, if the best is still to come for Stroud and his gang of awesome receivers. So yeah, I think the lesson learned here is pretty simple. Don't assume the number 2 overall pick of the NFL draft is not going to be good before he has played a single professional snap, because something called the S2 test told us that he wouldn't be. Man, I hate that test, and I know CJ Stroud does too. All right, guys, that's it from me. Hope you enjoyed the video. I have a full article on it for free over at fantasylife.com, where I also broke down some of our collective misses on the Dolphins backfield, as well as fading the always incredible Mike Evans, now well on his way to getting that 10th straight 1,000-yard receiving season. But obviously, plenty of more examples out there. Let me know in the comments what you think. And yeah, otherwise, good luck in week 13. Go win those fantasy championships, and don't be afraid to make a great start-sit decision.